Um, Hello.
Fine to meet you, Dave.
Hey, man. Thank you so much for being here and taking time. I really do appreciate it. And like I said, this is more a backyard barbecue than it is boardroom. So we're just going to keep it casual and as authentic as we can. But um, for the purpose of this here thing, this Fine 40 thing, which is focused on Black excellence in San Diego, it is my pleasure to be talking to you, the most recent CEO of Jack in the Box and San Diego area native, or at least resident. I don't know. We're going to find out. I
Yeah,
don't think it's
been here
native. I doubt that
a good
it's
number of
native.
years, but I'll give you that background too. Yeah.
So yes, can you maybe give us a slice? I know three things about you. You ran Jack in the Box franchise. You have a trio of young men that are singing songs, and you ripped your left arm from like wrist to armpit and are here to tell about it when maybe you shouldn't be. So I'd like to know about all that there,
All right.
and how you got to San Diego and what you do. Give me a little taste.
All right. So, Reader's Digest background,
Yes,
and you'll see family members passing around in the back. It's a busy household.
we
So,
know how it is. We know it. Welcome to
yeah.
COVID times.
So, I'll start with my parents. My parents immigrated to this country from Trinidad and Tobago,
Ah,
and my dad has always been an avid fisherman and ocean man, which was interesting in New York, very much like what my kids experience today down at the ocean. There's just not many people of color
yeah,
down at the ocean, and not many of them in boats and fishing and all the rest here in the States. As compared to the Caribbean, it's sort of,
yeah,
everybody's an ocean person.
yes.
And, him and my mom knew each other in Trinidad, but got married, got together, got married in New York after immigrating here. And neither one of them had college degrees, but they grew up at a time where if you worked hard and continued to grow in the place where you were working, you could do pretty well, and they did well. And I have three brothers, so my brothers and I always tell every woman that becomes part of the family that they're not going to have any female babies because. So, one out of my three brothers has kids. He has two sons, two nephews, Malcolm and Miles, and I have three sons, Lenny, Joe, and Cameron. And my dad has one brother, and his brother has one biological son. So it's just
wow, lots of Y chromosomes.
And so we grew up in New York in an all-black neighborhood. And, New York is oftentimes, particularly if you live out west, or even more so in the middle of the country, it's perceived as a very liberal place. But it actually was one of the most segregated, ethnocentric, and downright racist places you could possibly ever be.
Yeah.
And it was more about, yes, it's a melting pot, but it's almost like a pot that's refusing to melt. They don't really want to mix. They're in the same pot, but they're kind of like, I'm not mixing. And that's how it felt growing up there. And there were a lot of sort of expectations of you as a black person and as a white person too. And so you had to sort of decide, am I going to stay in my lane, or am I going to just do what my heart's telling me I'd love to do? So early on in my life, I started to experience some of those very false and inappropriate parameters on my life. It started with soccer. So growing up in New York, the only people who really played soccer at the time were affluent white people. That's really who soccer was for. And the only ones who really had access to high-level competitive soccer at the time were the most affluent. And it very much was a white environment. But yet in my backyard, growing up with Caribbean parents, we played soccer all the time. We played cricket too, but we also did other things, baseball and football and basketball and track and field. We did everything and swam and, fished. And we were into all sorts of stuff, but we did things oftentimes that others didn't expect us to do as people of color. And so I stuck to my lane till I was 11 years old and never played soccer outside the backyard. But I was actually a good soccer player. And
Mm-hmm.
so at 11, my football team didn't make it to the playoffs. And so I had free time on my hands. And the soccer season was ending. My dad convinced me that, hey, soccer teams will let you play the last 3 games of the season if you want to play rec soccer. And I said, now that I have lived up to the black expectation of me, I can go ahead and play soccer. And really, as a child, honestly, I processed it that way. It was just so much pressure in the street when you left your doors to represent whatever it meant.
Yeah.
And I very much, that was my community. I loved my community, my friends, and I wanted to be a part of it. So it wasn't, at the time, I didn't even understand it. I just was living it.
Yeah.
And I went and decided to do this thing called soccer. And my first game went very well. I stepped off the field, and immediately 2 traveling coaches said, will you join our team? And I actually joined a team playing under my brother's name. I was 11, but I played on the 13 over 13 group.
Wow.
I guess we would call the under 14s at the time.
Yeah.
And I played on that team for a while. As Derek Common, my second oldest brother, and I fell in love with it. And it started to sort of open my eyes to the fact that if I wanted to experience things in a white environment, I would be ridiculed in that environment, which I was. And a lot of, you get on a soccer field and you're the only one, and you go, people don't want to see you, and there was a lot of negativity that happened there. But I love that sport, and I wasn't going to let anyone stop me from doing it. And honestly, my friends back home, as much as I thought I'd feel sort of the heat from them, they were actually very supportive. So perception wasn't necessarily reality. You heard little things, but the pressure on the field was way worse than the pressure in the neighborhood. The neighborhood kind of accepted that. But that experience is important. As much as it's a childhood memory and experience, it's really important because it actually fuels some of our motivation to stay in San Diego later in life.
Wow.
So I'll that's a foreshadowing. I'll tell more of the story. So, we were a family in the late 70s who experienced busing in New York, the integration of the school system. And that was another really awful experience. Just complete chaos in the schools, teachers who didn't want you there, communities who didn't want us there. And now, their school went from being, less than 1% people of color to like 20% overnight.
Wow.
And black kids showed up not feeling accepted, which immediately created conflicts. And, white kids showed up feeling like we shouldn't be there. And then you look back on it, all that came from the parents. Kids are on the internet from the parents, but there was a bit of chaos. And I was fortunate enough, things were bad. Teachers were striking. All these kind of things were happening. And my parents finally decided that we just weren't going to get a good education. So they begged, borrowed, and stole. Basically, one of my uncles who was doing pretty well lent them some money to send us to Catholic school. And I admit that environment was absolutely fantastic. Although we were very much the minority in that environment, the infrastructure of those schools was not going to tolerate racism. And the teachers cared about every student, no matter where you came from. And as much as, the Catholic Church has obviously been through so much scandal. And it's unfortunate because so many of my friends and family that went to Catholic school will tell you it was incredible. It was a catalyst to the rest of our white futures. So went to Catholic school, and I met my wife. Funny enough, I was in 8th grade. My brothers, my two older brothers, and an older friend took me to the high school dance. At the high school I was going to be going.
You were always overachieving. This is just from the gate.
As an 8th grader, I'd go to this high school dance and I'd meet this girl named Allison. Everybody told me, she was a freshman at the time, and everyone told me I was going to really like her. And, the two of us were kind of like, hey, but we played it cool. We acted like we weren't even interested in each other because everyone was telling her the same thing. And funny enough, as the years went on, by the time I was a junior, the two of us started dating. And we met on a Halloween dance. We started dating my junior year, the night of the Halloween dance, which we didn't go to, but we all hung out together.
Yes.
And years later, after graduating from college, I asked her to marry me on Halloween.
Oh, wow.
And Halloween was also our first date and our first kiss all those years ago. So that's my wife, Allison, who's, my best friend and, my wife and partner. Mm-hmm. And so we both had very similar values. We wanted to have kids early because we didn't want to be old with young kids. Mm-hmm. It's just something we had thought about as young people.
Yes.
And neither one of us was sort of that, play the field type of person. Yeah. We really wanted to be together, and we didn't feel any motivation not to be. So we've been together since high school. Wow. And it's not like, it's not like you don't have to learn about yourself and about the person you're with over time and actually love that person the right way. Yeah. But as close to fairy tale as it can be, right? High school. Yeah, man. Well, when we moved up and down the East Coast with ExxonMobil for years, when I graduated from college, I went to Drexel University for undergraduate and Nova Southeastern for graduate school. And when I graduated, I was located in Florida for a couple of years, and then my wife and I kept getting moved around by Mobil at the time, which then became ExxonMobil years later. So we moved 9 times in the first 11 years that we were together. And it was all up and down the East Coast. And the last move was to the West Coast, which was supposed to be, another 18-month to 2-year, assignment, and then move on. And we were starting to get ready to move to either New York or Chicago from here. Yeah. And we had Lenny before we moved out here. Jordan was on the way. Yeah. And we actually drove across the country. My wife was 6 months pregnant. Wow. So we had Jordan when we got here, and then a few years later, Cameron. And we just got to this point where we said, we don't want to move from San Diego. And part of the reason that we didn't want to move from San Diego was that it's beautiful and we loved being here. But a bigger motivation for us went back to that experience that I shared about playing soccer in New York. We felt that culturally, as we started to sort of immerse ourselves in the community in San Diego, a very diverse community in San Diego, we felt like San Diego, the people of San Diego, the culture of San Diego, and very much the culture of the West Coast was such that you as a human being should explore your passions and not feel restricted by any sort of societal, barriers or false parameters. And so we had this heart-to-heart conversation where we said, if we stay here, 2 things. One, our kids are likely not to be called the N-word until much later in their lives. It's not so cool out here, other than young people using it as a term of endearment, right? You're not going to hear it in a derogatory sense. Yes. Thrown at you the way in New York, it was an everyday occurrence. Yes. We thought that. We said, it'd be nice for our kids not to grow up experiencing all of that sort of hate and division as just the norm. And then the second thing we said was, here it seems like whatever our kids would want to do, whatever their passions were, they wouldn't feel restricted the way I felt restricted in New York. My wife has similar experiences as well. And so we said, this just seems like a place. So as we raised them out here, we had this philosophy about raising kids that our kids, if they want to explore something and we can give them the opportunity to, then we will. If they want to try out playing the guitar, okay, we'll do that. If you want to try surfing, we'll do that. If you want to try a sport, we'll do that. You want to try photography, we'll do whatever it is that you're searching out your passions, you're learning about you, you're finding your strengths. The only way to do that is to get exposed to as many things as possible. So we kind of always felt like, look, if they have a passion for it, or if they even think they do, let them try. And then we'll see if it's there, because they'll either keep with it or they won't. And so, they all had a passion for music, which was really because the house was a musical house. Yes. We didn't play much television. What we found is when we had a television on, we had breed very hyper little boys.
Yeah.
Like, you know, if the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were on,
Yeah.
they were jumping off the couch, kicking, like, oh my God, they're going crazy. So, you know, they got so hyper. We're like, you know, we need to direct this energy and not let it just be like this television-induced chaos in the house. So we turned the TV off and no video games. And then we said, only on the weekends you can play video games. Well, they started getting into Rock Band.
Yes.
You know, this video game. They had killed that game. They mastered it. And but what's funny is they didn't know the words to a lot of the songs, because those are classic rock songs that Allison and I grew up with.
Yes.
So then we would tell them, oh, you're going to like this song, you know, Roxanne by the Police, or Don't Stand So Close to Me, or you know, Stairway to Heaven or something. And then they would, oh no, I don't know if we like the song. We're like, come on, let's play that song. And we'd sing it.
Yes.
Yeah. Like, oh, I didn't know that song was so great. And my wife's got like this encyclopedic memory. She's like, I told you, if you just let the first 30 seconds go, you know.
Yes.
But after they started to get into it, we started basically playing playing with their minds. You know, we're like, no. You have a real guitar. You get just as easily as you're playing that. So they started begging for instruments. Like, well, can I get one? Well, no, maybe Christmas, you know. Christmas, about 12, 13 years ago, we bought all instruments, and that was the beginning of their.
Oh, man. Oh, I'm telling you, it is a beautiful thing to behold their whole situation. I'm loving it.
It's fun to watch all these old videos of them. You know, they were on KUSI playing and all this kind of fun. You know, to be in a place today where they're actually pursuing it seriously is great. And I don't care what happens. It's a journey. Don't worry too much about the destination, because life will be horrible. But this is journey you on, and get on it. You know.
So tell me then how you pivoted to Jack in the Box. So oil guy comes to the West Coast, sees all this unrestricted, like, new definition of black life, and surfing, guitar playing. And so you're here. How did Jack in the Box happen? And then I'm also curious about what, if anything, being black in San Diego has felt or looked like. Like, have you, you know, it's one thing to be black in New York, I get it, right? But it doesn't come without, I'm assuming, it doesn't come without any kind of, you know, repercussions here too, you know. So I'm curious about this.
So I'll talk about the ExxonMobil thing to Jack, and then I'll talk a little bit about that. Okay. So with Mobil, I get to the West Coast, and actually just before we moved here, they announced the merger with ExxonMobil, which, you know, was a little scary, but at the same time, my career was going well, and I wasn't necessarily worried about it. It's a bigger company, at the time, biggest country in the world, I think.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, you know, more opportunity. Let's just go for it, you know. So it took a year and a half for California to be part of the merger. So for a year and a half, we kind of lived running our own business unit, which was fantastic and a really great experience.
Yeah.
But when the merger happened, I started to learn more about the Exxon culture. Mm. It was just a different culture, one that wasn't right for me. Mm. And so I decided, you know, it's time to think about something else.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I got a call from a recruiter that Jack in the Box was building this convenience store and gasoline brand, which I had no idea why they'd be doing that. But I was curious, and I took the interview, and I actually fell in love with the people right in the interview. Mm. It was just, how do I describe it? It was a very open, warm culture with very little pretense. Mm. And, you know, as I met these people, and they were just so sort of transparent, they're asking me questions about how to run their business with complete transparency about the fact that they don't know how to run the business they're hiring me to run. Yeah. And I thought, you know, this is different. This is a culture that I think I could enjoy, because it just seems so based in truth. Yeah. So I ended up joining the company to actually build this gasoline convenience store brand for Jack. Basically, we were building these 5,000 square foot facilities. Yeah. Half of it was a Jack in the Box, and half of it was a convenience store and gasoline. It just allowed them to buy some of the bigger pieces of real estate that they couldn't afford to buy with just a restaurant. So I was just a means to an end for Jack in the Box to grow, and I didn't mind doing that. Yeah. But ultimately, Wall Street never really liked the idea of Jack being in that business. Yeah. So after 4.5 years, they decided to sell it. So I actually helped them sell.
Yes.
And actually, it's funny. 3 years in, I told them they should sell.
Yes.
It didn't make sense, and they kind of pushed back. And I said, "Well, look, I'll keep running it as long as you want me to, and I'll keep building it. But
Yeah.
I'm not thinking it makes sense based on what I'm seeing here."
Yeah.
But we sold it. We sold it to Chevron. Those businesses are still running today.
Wow.
The Quick Stuff. It was called Quick Stuff, which was the brand that we built. I think we did a great job of building a convenience store that had decent volumes and had this sort of whimsical Jack in the Box culture built into it. So, for example, the dairy fridge was labeled cow.
Yeah.
It's like we had really fun graphics, almost like artist inspired graphics on all of our cups and POP and everything else. It was just a very eclectic and edgy brand that's still running today. So I was proud of that. But we sold it, and I got an opportunity to be a regional vice president for Jack in the Box restaurants.
Yes.
Big experiment.
Yeah.
And did pretty well in that role, and then continued to get opportunities from there all the way up to president and CEO. So it was a really good run.
Wow.
No complaints. It was a great company.
Yeah.
And people ask me today, you're 50 years old. Why did you leave? In fact, many people think that I must have gotten fired because there was lots of public disputes between the franchise organization and the corporation, in particular me.
Yeah.
And the issue was really around the franchise wanting us to invest way more money in businesses they now owned, businesses that we had sold them over time through a refranchising effort. And that was not going to happen, at least not to the degree they wanted it to. So, I became the bad guy, right? Which is part of the role. To be a CEO, you're not always going to be the good guy. You got to say no sometimes.
Yeah.
But it created these public disputes. So when I decided to retire, people were like, "Oh, well, yes, with all those things happening, things didn't work out." I'm like, actually, things worked out great. That's why I retired. But no, but you're only 50, so that can't be.
Wow.
And I'm like, nice. And then I keep getting these questions from folks. So are you retired, or are you going to do something else? I guess you're going to take some time off and then maybe think about what's next. Because really the assumption is, no way in hell he really retired, And so I have to keep kind of telling people, look, if I do something, it'll be because I'm bored.
Yeah.
Which might happen, but I got a couple of small projects that are keeping me busy now, so I'm hoping that never happens.
Yes.
But the truth is, I retired because the role of CEO eventually starts to chip away at your soul, and it's a very difficult, high stress position to be in. And as much as I enjoyed it, I also had to sort of level with myself. And I think for everybody, your expiration date is your own.
Yeah.
But my expiration date had come because if I had stayed, I would have suffered the consequences of staying too long, which, you see these people who are sort of a shell of who they used to be because carrying so much stress so much longer than they should have.
Yeah.
So I decided, look, it's not like I'm, so wealthy that I can just completely throw away money.
Yeah.
I've got to be more planful and budgeted. But I made enough money to retire. And so I decided, look, I had some good friends that also encouraged me and said, look, what's it worth if you can't actually live, right?
Yeah.
And so at some point, if this isn't good for you as a human being, stop doing it, or do something else. But you can't keep doing it. And so that's what I did. And it kind of shocked a lot of folks, particularly Wall Street, because I had a very good relationship with the analyst investors. But I really felt respected in the way that they treated me on my way out, and so happy about the way that went.
Yeah. So then what? So when you say that, man, that's a decision. My goodness. So I'm looking at you. I'm 45. You're 50. First of all, respect. Respect. Congratulations. That's a beautiful story. And then this pivot though, I'm really curious then, for the driver for you when you stepped into the world of Jack, and even as you were saying it, I was like, oh yeah, just thinking about the personality of your I don't know what you would say in that world, the representative of Jack versus Wendy versus Ronald and all them, like, Jack is pretty cool, man.
Yeah.
So I kind of get it, like the vibe. So it's being kind of feeling that vibe from you, as you say, when you walked into it and the fit was right and the people were authentic and transparent. To step away, then realizing that shouldering this was going to take a toll that you didn't want it to take. Maybe you'd run it as far as you wanted to run it to your own expiration date. I'm curious then about what does light you up. Like, what is it? It's kind of, you're in green fields right now.
That's right.
Blue ocean, whatever you want to say. What are you?
I've always wanted the opportunity to do something a little more entrepreneurial. In fact, I chose Nova Southeastern Business School. It's called Wayne Heisinger School of Business, and it was the School of Entrepreneurship. I chose that because I really wanted to be involved in something more entrepreneurial or innovative.
Yeah.
I got to build the Quick Stuff brand at Jack in the Box. That was the opportunity I was looking for. Investing someone else's capital and building something that you and your team envision, right? You don't do it alone, but it was great to be able to see those things come to light. And then, leading Jack in the Box was a great experience where I felt it was very rewarding as a leader. So I think I sort of evolved to this place where that pressing need to be innovative all the time was maybe replaced with the fulfillment that came with leading.
Yeah.
And so I did that for a season, but I've never really scratched the itch of the entrepreneurial itch. So as I've left Jack in the Box now, I am an investor in a small entrepreneurial business here in San Diego. I won't talk too much about that because the founder, she hasn't exposed all of that yet, but she's running a great business, and I feel like it's the it's sort of that little mustard seed that's going to grow. I think she's going to do really well.
Yeah.
And I'd like to be a part of that, and I've enjoyed working with her in the past, so I would like to continue to do that. And then my brother and I have partnered on a small concept that we're building. So I'm starting to scratch that itch. Those are the things that get me up in the morning to start tinkering.
Yeah.
And then, it's kind of nice, honestly, particularly physically, to have more time to do things that are just healthy. Right?
Yeah.
Be going for a run or going for a swim or whatever. I mean, I've spent so many years grinding it down and working out was more stress relief in the past. It almost out of just necessity, but it's nice to just feel good. Actually be able to get a nice sleep and not be grinding so hard all the time. And so I put a little more energy and time into being active. And then we'll see kind of what evolves from there. But the entrepreneurial thing, to answer your question, going, and I'm hoping that grows. That's why when I tell people, I've got a few projects, I'm hoping they keep me busy because I want them to grow to a point where they'll keep me busy. My goal for those things would be, make a little bit of money, but more importantly, if I can start a family business, get family friends involved. That would be great. Things like other people who have been a part of my life. That would be
I have a guy that I follow, Derek Minor. He happens to be kind of like a Christian hip hop-y type of dude, but he's so, he's scrappy. He kind of comes out of Lecrae's world. I don't know if you were familiar. You're kind of a music person, but the whole world of like Christian hip hop has often been this kind of stepchild to, no shade to stepchildren and stepfolk in the world, but you know what I'm saying? Like just the other portion of hip hop that a lot of hip hoppers don't look at. But man, there are some people that can rhyme in that space that I'm like, ooh. And Derek Miner is one of them. But he has a very entrepreneurial thing going. So he does a lot of kind of mentorship and leadership around like owning your stuff. And he has a line that says, ownership is the new black, And so I'm feeling you kind of on this entrepreneurial family own, your own asset.
I have similar motivations and similar beliefs about that.
And to be real with you, so that's a lot of what's happening in this space because, I think we said, like I'm in majority spaces all the time. I'm here. I'm in Poway. I'm in North San Diego. You know, I'm biotech. Like I'm familiar. You know, I make my money and pay my bills in
Yep.
close proximity to non-black people. You know what I'm saying? But as I look across the landscape of this town and this country, you know, a couple things are kind of dawning on me around. You know, I feel like there's no shiny knight on a white horse going to gallop into town and make it all good. You know what I mean? And so, in the context of there's no one coming to save you, son. Like, what's possible in terms of empowerment and ownership and self determination?
You know, this is an interesting thing, and by the way, I haven't lost track of your other question about Black in San Diego.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing, I hated history growing up. Hated studying it. In fact, the whole time I went through college, the only class I ever got C's in was history. And, you know, should have been the easiest classes, but, you know, some of it is probably a little bit of an ADHD thing. And, you know, history wasn't necessarily taught in a experiential way.
Yes.
It wasn't a lot of problem solving. And so I had a hard time, honestly. It was like death on a stick for me. Fast forward, I think as I've been able to slow my mind down a bit, I've become more a student of history and trying to sort of learn and relearn things that I didn't get to do. You look at the history of this country, there's this, you know, history of slavery that is becoming better understood today, I think, than it has been in the past. And some truths about it are becoming more apparent. But if you look at what happened with the slave population, when they were freed, they were offered no catalyst to opportunity. 40 acres and a mule, that never materialized. Homesteads that everyone else got, that didn't materialize. Right? The funds to grow businesses, that didn't materialize. Right? So townships were being built by white immigrants funded by the U.S. government. While black slaves, who preceded all of them, were still trying to figure out how in any of these populations, you know, they were going to be able to make a living. Then you fast forward to the next waves of immigration, what you see, and this manifests itself in New York so clearly, you see that immigrants came across and they essentially migrated into the sections of the community that spoke their language. Which allowed them to be accepted and to get job opportunities. And when you looked at what those job opportunities were, they were oftentimes businesses that were being built by those communities. Because those communities couldn't step into communities outside their own and get jobs. Right? And so people look at the stereotypes of certain you know, people from certain backgrounds earning certain businesses, but what they don't look at is the history. The history will show you that they bought those businesses, they built those businesses, they were targeting themselves toward those places because those were opportunities they could have more control over. And they sacrificed a lot to do that because there weren't other opportunities, and if they wanted to get ahead, that's what they had to do. So now you look at the community that got the least at that time, with the black community, and you know, you've heard for forever that, you know, black-owned businesses are going to think they're important. They need to manifest themselves. And, you know, this idea of being an entrepreneur, you know, is an opportunity to do that. So, you know, hope to be able to participate in that. And God willing, you know, God willing, it's actually a God-inspired idea that my brother and I have. And it actually that's kind of the way we look at it, right? It's like, it seems to be a very solid idea, so let's take it as far as we can go until we run up to a barrier that we can't break down or hurdle we can jump. We keep it going, and hopefully one day we look back and go, look what happened. I think it's important. And I think it's important for the black community to think about ownership. That's an important next step for the community, because whether it be home ownership or business ownership, you know, those things, they create power.
Oh man. Oh
and
man.
how that can be used,
Yeah.
in the appropriate ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when
Yeah.
you look at what happens today with our government,
Yeah.
and how much influence
Yeah.
businesses have over the government.
Yeah.
I mean, some even
Undeniable.
use our government and be done by
Yeah. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the government is here supposedly to govern the people,
Yeah.
but their influences are
Oh.
going to be those who have money and
Very
power.
much. Yeah.
And Black community has less of it than they have less of it.
Yeah. Yeah. We're in the third largest biotech hub in the country after Boston and the Bay. And I often look kind of at the parallel level on the globe. We're kind of, Atlanta's not too far away. So I think I have visions sometimes of, San Diego as the left coast, Atlanta. If there's 6% Black folks in San Diego, which is a couple 100,000 people really. And, but man, I'm with you on this. What's possible if you get a small group of like-minded people together. Now, I have questions for you though about a couple things. So, and I know we're going to keep coming back to the Black piece because that's the thing I'm on. But as I've started to do this survey, essentially, you run into people that have conversations about, there's the San Diego Black Chamber, there's the Urban League, ACLU, NAACP. If you're a Divine Nine type folk out of the frats and sorors, there's the whole boule. That's its own whole other thing. And, I've had some folks kind of, almost say good luck, you know what I mean, trying to find the through line that's going to unify folks and create kind of a critical mass or a vanguard to help, create some up movement or whatnot. So, so from that, I want to ask you, what has your experience been with Black San Diego? And what are your thoughts about that? Like, do you have any visions that kind of go beyond family, or for now, are you kind of like be the change, you know what I mean, focused on your own?
Yeah, so I do have visions of having influence beyond the family, but not for this next immediate season.
Yeah.
Some of that is because I need a little time to recover from my last season.
Yeah, man.
And, and some of it is because I would like to, particularly as my kids are young, give them the attention that at this time I'm fortunate enough to give.
Yeah.
That it isn't going to last forever, right? They're going to go off and do their things.
Yeah.
And at some point, not all going to be living at home. So, this is probably not that long of a season, but it's a season where I'll stay relatively focused. I think that, so my experience with the Black community in San Diego is that, like any community, it's first, right? Yeah. I always used to criticize when I'd hear these Black leaders say, the Black community, and they would fill in the blanks like what we all think.
Yeah.
I'd say, well, you don't really speak for all of us all the time.
Yeah.
Right? There are some things that we may mostly agree on and other things that we don't agree on at all.
Yeah.
And so I kind of look at the community and say, look, I don't want to be guilty of the things I used to criticize. Right?
Yeah.
The Black community is very diverse. You've got diversity of socioeconomic position in this county. And I think you also have certainly diversity of education and professional backgrounds. But you also have a pretty big immigrant population in the county of Blacks that are coming from all over the world. And so you have this national diversity as well.
Yeah.
And I found that the people in general who are here, not just Black folks, but people in general, they have open minds to one another, right? And so I found the community at large to be more accepting than the places I came from in the past.
Yeah.
And I found the Black community here to be more accepting and inviting than some of the Black communities that I've been a part of or touched in the past. And some of that is likely because there's not that many of us, right? And so you have an opportunity to meet folks who maybe have some similarities to you, not just in color, but backgrounds as well. life experiences as Black people in this country, you don't want to take it lightly. It's hard to find folks who are like you in San Diego.
Yeah.
And so I do think whoever said, it'll be tough to kind of get everybody on the same page, that's probably right.
Yeah.
But I don't think that it's impossible to get the Black community to be generally supportive of one another. I think if the expectations are right, then you can generate some outcomes that are actually measurable. So, for example, if you were to say, we want the whole Black community of San Diego to get together on this single issue and be unified on it. Let's go make change happen. That's hard to do. I'm not saying one shouldn't try, particularly if it's a big issue, but it's hard to do. But if someone said, we want to build a community that supports itself, because this community, in order for it to advance itself, needs support that it may not always get outside of its community.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've had folks reach out to me recently to say, hey, would you be a part of what we're doing? Right. Teach for America, for example.
Yeah.
And I said, well, my focus is kind of elsewhere right now, but what is it you actually want? And the answer was like, I need support from influential people who will be a part of the conversation. But heck, I could do that.
Yeah.
If you want me to go fundraise for you, right now, in the middle of everything else I got going on, in the first season of rest I've had in,
Probably
I'm
not.
sorry, I don't want to be selfish. That's not going to happen.
Probably not.
But if you want me to be a person of influence on phone calls and Zoom calls and be a part of critical conversations and helping people understand sort of some thoughts, opinions, ideas, experiences that might help advance education in San Diego, for example, I'd love to be part of that conversation. I'd love to support you in that. And then over time, as I have got some rest and then have time, I may, get more. Those are, again, realistic expectation, right? Now you can have some measurable outcomes. So I think if this community looked at things that way, we could do that. If I look at, we'll use a professional community, lawyers.
Yeah.
Lawyers have associations all over the place, and they actively participate in these associations and support one another within that profession. Hey, you're looking for a such and such attorney? I know a guy. I know a gal. I know a firm, right? And so very much like that, the Black community could support one another, right?
Yeah.
Hey, you're trying to get some help. I know a person who has some experience there that would be willing to talk to you because they're of like mind to try to support people who need a little help, who need some advice, or this person's a banker and they do these things and you may need some of that expertise in what you're doing. We don't have that network built to support the community in trying to help people to get to this place of fill in the blank. People getting college educations, people owning their own business, people owning a home, people getting the right medical care when they're pregnant, people getting the right support when they're in need. We need that, right? So
I was just talking to a guy yesterday who said essentially that. He was like, you remember when you were in college, first Fridays, people would just pull up on the quad or wherever, and you didn't have to agree with everybody. You'd do pockets here, pockets there, and pockets there, but at least you had kind of this collective watering hole. So I'm hearing you there. I'm also conscious of our time, so don't feel. I know you have things you have to do, but before I let you go, though, I want to be able to touch down on two other little bits. So the point of a lot of these conversations is to try to glean, inspiring tips, right? So the things that have fueled whatever modicum of success you would ascribe to your life, right? So the things that are either practices or perspectives or mindsets or what you think have really helped you weather storms and move through tough decisions, like ones that leave, an organization at 50 years old or what have you. I'm sure you've had tougher decisions to make than that. And then another one is me personally, this intersection of kind of race, faith, and masculinity is a thing for me. And you're from all boys, a lot of boys. You got 3 boys, 3 beautiful black souls. They're so fantastic. We can spend a whole hour talking about them. And then I've heard you say, some of this kind of God willing thing. So I'm curious about what's driving you, and then anything you would say about what it means to be black, or what faith means to you, or where you hold those things as a black man.
Yeah. So I have a very unique story. It actually relates to what you talked about early on, that I cut my wrist all the way up my arm. And that actually was the beginning of my walk, my faith.
Yeah, I understand.
So I was, this is like a parent's nightmare, but I was 7 years old, and my 14-year-old brother, which was my oldest brother at the time, would babysit his 3 younger brothers for 15 minutes every day. 15 minutes. So we got home from school at 3 o'clock. My mother got home from work at 3:15. And my dad, who worked in Manhattan, would get home later, more like 6 o'clock at night. My mom worked on Long Island. She got home earlier, and particularly had a job, found a job where the hours allowed her to get home and make sure we weren't, run them up, which we would have been. So 15 minutes. So in 15 minutes, we would go nuts. We were running around the house, jumping off stuff, being fools. Yeah. And one day, I wanted my oldest brother to play tag with me, which is funny. I ended up going to college on a partial track and field scholarship. So I was fast. I always wanted someone to chase me, see if you can catch me. So I kept kind of egging him on, and finally, he's like, "All right, my little brother wants me to. I'm gonna play. I'll play the game he wants to play." Yeah. So he starts coming to get me, and I made a beeline for the front door. Yeah. Well, the front door in the Northeast, if you're familiar with the Northeast, and even all cold weather climates, you have a storm door outside the regular door. So it's like, you think of a screen door, an open screen door. We call it a storm door because in the winter you put a piece of glass in that open space, and in the summer you replace the glass with a screen. Yeah. And so summertime you keep the door open, get some air. Yeah. Wintertime you got this piece of glass so that the weather doesn't come in as soon as you open the door. Back then you had door-to-door salespeople, you had milkman, the paper boy, right? It was a different world. Yeah. You were opening the door a lot, and people knocked on your door a lot. Yeah. That storm door kept, hey, I don't want what you're buying, and I'm not letting all my heat out of my house in the middle of winter. So you got the storm door, right? Yeah. So anyway, I went running for the door, and it had a little latch. It was a lightweight door. We used to pop that thing open at full speed all the time. Right? You run right through it. Right? Yeah. Well, this time, the door had stuck, and the latch had stuck. So as I went to pop it with my right hand, it didn't open, and the left side of my body went right through the glass. And it ripped me to shreds from here, the beginning of my wrist.
Ooh, oh, you're not
all the way. I can't get all the way up there. It used to be connected, then I grew. So, and I started bleeding to death. So I ran across the street, and I started calling for someone to help me at my neighbor's house, which is sort of the emergency. Any emergency happens, kids, go across the street. To Miss Irene's house, Miss Parentcheek was her name. Yeah. Irene Parentcheek. Like, go over there and make sure if you need help. So I ran over there, top speed, busted in the house, and they used to babysit kids over there. And I'm yelling for someone to help me. Could not find an adult. And Michael, the oldest son, who was 18 at the time, he was actually watching the few kids that were there. And as I'm screaming, I kind of panicked. I looked down and I saw the bones in my arm, and I decided, go through these mental weird places where I thought it can't be as bad as it looks. I'm going to turn on the faucet of this thing and rinse it off, and it's not going to be as bad as it looks, which would have been a real catastrophic thing to do. Oh. As I went to turn on the faucet, Michael can't find me because he's heard screaming, trying to find which kid's screaming, but I'm running around the house and he's running around the house trying to find me. And so he catches me in the bathroom, just as I'm turning the faucet on, and he grabs my arm, puts a tourniquet on it. And then no sooner he got the tourniquet on, one of the kids who was being babysat, their father showed up early from work to take his daughter to go get some ice cream. Here I am bleeding to death. Michael scoops me up in his arms. We jump in the car, and his dad gets to the hospital as fast as he can. By the time we got there, Michael was covered from head to toe in my blood. Yeah, I was, moments away from dying. And, when I got to the hospital, I just had this very, people will refer to it as an out-of-body experience. I don't know if that's exactly how I would describe it, but what I had was a sense of peace that I was going to be okay, and also this understanding that I wasn't alone. And I felt like I was there with God, and I was going to be okay. And I chilled out, and I kind of just went through that whole experience, weeks in the hospital, the whole thing, never feeling alone, and not feeling like this was the end for me. And so fast forward, I was seeking God from those experiences. And right after I came out of the hospital, I used to go to this little Presbyterian church, and they gave me this little Bible, and they endorsed it and everything. And then I kind of went on my young man journey of being an idiot. And
we do. Yeah, I get it.
And then I'm 20-something years old, and at my uncle's house. My uncle had lived with us for a while and whatever. I'm at his house, and I'm in his little guest room. He's got a little bookshelf there, and I see this little Bible on it, and I'm like, oh, let me check that out. And I pull it out, and it's the Bible actually that I had gotten from the Presbyterian church. And it was sort of a full circle for me. Like all those years, I came back full circle, and they're letting the dog come hang out with us. and so that was really the beginning of my faith-based journey. It started when I was a kid, but when I was in my early 20s is when I felt like, okay, something real here. I've experienced it many times in my life, and it's time for me to sort of acknowledge it. And so, my whole life has been this, my whole life since that point. And then when I was in my late 20s, after searching every major religion and reading books and studying them and doing a lot of praying for what was real and what have you, I made a decision that Christianity was really not big. And I've had this relationship with God that's, based on the fact that I'm imperfect and I'm going to go through a lot of stuff in this world, and I need God. I don't want to go it alone. So I look at every major decision like that. The decision to be Jack in the Box wasn't easy, but it was very much a faith-based decision. I felt like the job would change me into someone that I wasn't supposed to be. And I left ExxonMobil for the very same reason. I felt like the culture of that company was not the right place for me to be. And I have just had faith. I'm not going to be stupid. Like, I've got to feed my family. Have the next paycheck. So I'm not telling people, hey, if something doesn't feel right, just leave and do it in the name of God. No, like, don't be dumb, be practical. But if it's not right, then take the steps in the right place so that you can manage your mind. You have responsibility over that. And then let the miracles come when the miracles are really needed, but don't try to create them out of nothing. And the way I look at this whole thing with masculinity and faith and what have you is, faith makes you stronger. The story that I tell people is when I was 12, 13 years old, I got in a lot of fights. And they were just skirmishes. Thank God nobody was pulling out guns back then. But we have these little fights, and then, we work it out after. Parents would get involved. Hey, why'd your kid have to fight with my kid? But it wasn't the end of the world, right? It happened. Everybody sort of managed through it. But, I got to a place where, I really wasn't afraid to have a fight. And I really wasn't afraid to have a fight with much bigger people either. In some ways, it was almost like a challenge, especially since my second oldest brother was twice my weight at the time. Like, shoot, if I could deal with him. I can talk about this in the street. That's not the right mentality to have it. I kind of got brazen and almost felt like, if someone messes with me, I'm not going to back down.
Yeah.
Even if I have an opportunity to just diffuse it,
let it go.
Even out of ego, I'm not backing down.
Yeah.
Then my uncle, who was taking martial arts at the time, said, "You should come take jujitsu with me, and learn how to defend yourself for real." But his ulterior motive was, once you actually do that, you don't feel a need to prove it.
Yeah.
I took a couple of years of martial arts, and it's funny, after that, I didn't feel a need to prove anything. If someone was talking a bunch of nonsense, I wouldn't escalate the situation. I would say, "Hey, well, you have your opinions. I'm here if you want to talk about it." But I wasn't like trying to start a fight.
Yes.
I'll defend myself.
Yes.
So I wasn't trying to start. I wasn't kind of like, "What'd you say?" And like you're trying to make it into something that it didn't need to be. You're the idiot. You clearly have lost your mind. I don't even lose my mind because of you. So I feel secure in the fact that if I need to defend myself, I can do okay.
Yes.
And God willing, I will never have to.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to create a situation when it can be de-escalated. And that happened because I learned something. Well, same thing with faith.
Yeah.
You talk about faith and masculinity, it doesn't make you strong to go prove something as a man because you take advantage of women or you're violent or any of those things that are associated with men that are negative. And sometimes men think that that's exactly what makes them a man. I got in a bar fight. Oh, I hooked up with this many women or whatever. It's like, no, actually just proving that you're insecure. That's what you prove. And everybody else sees it, only you don't. And so faith is a way for you to become comfortable with the fact that you have nothing to prove on this earth to anybody. Respect yourself, respect your God. But you don't have anything to prove, particularly in all the wrong ways that the world would want you to prove, including how much money you make, what profession you have, what degree you have, what zip code you live in. That's all masks that you put on to make yourself feel better in this world. It's not important. The guy who drives the cab is just as important as the guy who's the CEO sitting in the back of it. We are all human beings. We all have value and a lot of value. So when you realize that through faith, the same way I realized some things through martial arts, then you can chill out, treat people with respect and love, and not feel like you have something to prove and someone needs to be beneath you for you to feel better about yourself, or somehow put your own insecurities in check. So, that's how I look at faith. You can be a really strong man, a much stronger man, if you have faith, because you stop having to prove anything based on the world's construct. And that's what makes you strong. So that's
that riff right there was like kind of lit me up. Your whole person came alive in there. I can feel that conviction and the strength that resides in you as a result of that. That's
and I'm honest with people. It's not like I don't have the same feelings they have. There are times when I'm thinking, man, would I like to, right? Like that person, or, I'd like to say this thing, or I'd like to, whatever, we all feel those things. But then you say, okay, wait, that's not who I have to be. I don't have to be that person, right?
So do you have practices or methodologies or things that you lean on to kind of restore that understanding, or things you come back to, because some people meditate, some people work out, some people have triggers throughout their day or things to kind of shift their thinking. Do you have anything?
Two things for me. One is, because my mind is the way it is, and I'm definitely an ADHD mind, which for me and my sons refer to as our superpowers. It's not a negative thing. It's just the way you think. Quite frankly, it allows you to hyper-focus. It allows you to learn rapidly. Because a lot of other people struggle with, you don't. And you don't sleep nearly as much as everybody else, and you still are fine. Those all come with that. If someone just told you, hey, what if you didn't need a lot of sleep and you could learn things really fast? You could hyper-focus on things. Would you be happy with that? Sure, I would. So why are we creating negative labels on that? If someone said, hey, but what if it came with the fact that you're kind of always going to be high energy, maybe more energy than the room is ready for at times? Okay. I think I'd accept the good with the bad, right? But we don't see it that way. We see it as because you are a little more energized than the average person. There must be something wrong with you,
Yeah.
or maybe not.
Yeah.
Maybe you have some strength that just needs to apply towards something.
Yes. Yeah.
So, to slow my mind enough
Yes.
to actually gain perspective
Yes.
and sort of get that meditation time, I typically need to be active.
Yes.
Which means a 5-mile run for me is the most meditative thing I can possibly do.
Yes.
A walk on the golf course by myself or with people who don't want to talk or get my resume in the middle of the round of golf.
Yes. Yes.
Those things are all sort of restorative. They're meditative for me.
Yes.
So I do that. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is I look at prayer differently than most people. I won't even see differently than most people, different than many people.
Yeah.
But many people look at prayer through a religious context. I get on my knees and I say my prayers.
Mm-hmm.
But if you actually look at the way the Christian faith is built, it's built on the premise that when Christ rose, he left behind the Holy Spirit in all of us. There's only one Holy Spirit, which means you can't actually have a different thought about the same subject than me if it's both God inspired, right? People don't think that way, but if there's one Holy Spirit and you're saying, hey, racism is okay, and I'm saying racism is not, only one of us can be right if it's God inspired, right?
Yes.
So you can't both be right. And that's sort of the problem with these broad versions of, faith.
Yeah.
Division is okay. They think that not loving one another just because someone has a different sexual orientation or belief system is okay in the name of Jesus Christ. It's not.
Yeah.
If you actually read the book, I've read the book from cover to cover. If you read it, you will find out the foundation of the faith is love.
Yes.
Right? Just read Matthew 5. You'll get the whole faith.
Sermon on the Mount, baby. The Beatitudes on down. I'm with you.
But don't pull them out of context, right? Because God doesn't just say, be this way. And he then says, if you're not this way, you're better than the non-believers. Yeah. Right? And he's talking about love and grace. So when you treat this person who doesn't, this person's a sinner, like you're not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Stop judging. You already know how you're supposed to behave. The point is, people will create religion out of these things, including prayer, and they'll say, well, I wake up in the morning and I pray. Before I go to bed at night, I pray. If the Holy Spirit is in you, you are communing with God constantly. So this second answer to your question is, I don't have a formal I pray time. Probably my running time would be the closest to that. But what I have is a constant dialogue. I mean, people think I'm crazy if they do. But my mind is constantly having that dialogue, which is what helps when you're triggered, right? When you're triggered, you can use your faith to talk yourself off the ledge. But if you say, hey, I have a prayer time, what you've done is you've actually reduced the power of your faith to these moments, which means you could be triggered all day until you finally chill out. You go, wait a second, or you can realize God is with you always. Have this, I just call it communing with God. Have this happen constantly. And that's the way I look at it. And so it doesn't make you perfect. It's just like you said, it's a mechanism. It's a means to an end. It's a method, but I would recommend that for folks that if they just understand that, you're not alone until you're not alone ever. You don't just have one opportunity to speak to God every day during prayer time or when you go to church on Sunday. How to manage yourself, have the help to manage yourself.
We sometimes say around here, my wife likes to joke, like, here, I'll tell you a couple things to piggyback on your story. I met my wife when I was 12 in church. Her mom is the music minister, right?
Oh, that's awesome.
Up in my town. So I've known her forever and ever. And we now live here with mother-in-law, and there's 6 people under this roof here, by the way. And it's great. We love it. And my wife went to APU, to Azusa Pacific University, and Fuller Seminary, and also traveled singing. But we joke a lot around here about praying without ceasing, and try to talk to the kids about whatever prayer might look and feel like. But I really resonate with what you just said conceptually. I will often frame to them this idea of, I think that the common human malady is the feeling that you're separate and insufficient versus connected, and there's nowhere that God is not. There's nowhere God is not. That closer than your breath thing is legit. So how do we enter into states where we can just acknowledge and fall back into that? And so, my little practice is kind of daily reminders and that same kind of running dialogue and conversation to kind of soak and acknowledge that that's what's going on. Not that I don't ever get off course either, right? Like I'll find myself like, oh, what just happened? Well,
it's okay. It's just a matter of like, how are you managing self?
Yes. Yeah.
Alone.
Yeah.
I don't know, being responsible to a higher power is, it's empowering in that you don't have to rely on oftentimes what are pressures in society to behave a certain way. And instead you can say, I do understand how I'm supposed to behave in this situation.
Yeah.
I'm just going to do that. Right?
Yeah.
So regardless of what people do. And, I remember, the struggle for me growing up when I was younger and being with this woman that I'd been with since high school. It's like how many men and even family members and, even parents would be pressuring in the field. You should get out there sowing your wild oats. And I'm like, this woman loves me and I love her. Yeah. We really enjoy each other's time. She's a wonderful person. You're not talking about any kind of weird, dramatic, whack job, high maintenance. I mean, neither one of us are like that, and we're enjoying each other's time. Why would you not just celebrate that? Why does that have to be a bad thing? And then later in life, you see some of the same folks, and I go, okay, well, who got it right? How many wonderful relationships did you waste because you had something stupid to prove? And I've had this incredible experience. I haven't missed out on any. If anything, I think the folks who, threw away great relationships in the name of what the world thought they should do, much missed out. So I consider myself lucky.
Yes, man. And I consider myself lucky for having had an hour and 15 minutes sitting here and chatting with you. I want to say thank you so much, like from deep down. This has been a joy. I want to say congratulations, because you, by all sorts of measures, are living in some excellence, my friend. Those 3 rays of light that are walking around your house, those seriously, it's a beautiful thing to behold. It's funny, I was calling them, like Lenny is clearly Lenny Jr. Cam, I was calling him Tyler the Creator in a way, like just all of that energy, I could feel it. And Jordy, man, he is like a pastor or something, like his kind of in-betweenness, like levity. First of all, my daughter thinks he looks like Michael B. Jordan, so she just already does. He's already got points, but it's just the spirit of humility and grace and joy and all that, not being afraid to live outside the box that people might put you in, that you were describing in your story. I can feel it living in them. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure. And I'm hoping, at some point we get a chance to break bread, have a cup of coffee, or do something and meet live. So
let's do it, man. Let's do it.